Gurdjieff raises high expectations for establishing an esoteric school in the West. The people drawn to him find powerful answers to their burning questions and practical methods for inner change. His teaching gains further credibility by being ancient, objective, and tested.
All religious teachings consist of two parts, the visible and the hidden. To be disappointed in religion means being disappointed in the visible, and to feel the necessity for finding the hidden and unknown part of religion.
Today, we don't obviously associate religion with teaching. We don't think of a church or mosque or temple as a school. We associate religion with an act of faith, receiving moral instruction, or perhaps even just simply socializing. These outer exoteric aspects of religion always existed, but you had to penetrate them to arrive at the inner esoteric one.
The principle of esotericism is expressed in religious architecture. Temples are divided into sections of varying degrees of sacredness. You enter at the least sacred part, and as you travel inwards, the spaces become more holy. At the heart of every temple lies the most sacred place, the focal point of its architecture, the Holy of Holies.
I had the possibility of gaining access to the so-called Holy of Holies of nearly all Hermetic organizations inaccessible to the ordinary man, and of discussing and exchanging views with innumerable people who were real authorities.
The teachings of the outer circle of religion always speak of an external god or gods that govern the world we inhabit. Jehovah in Judaism, Brahman in Hinduism, Zeus in ancient Greece, Allah in Islam. The focus is on our proper relation to those gods, the forms of worship that invoke them, and the behaviour that pleases or displeases them. The outer meaning also delivers a moral code by which its community of believers should abide.
The outer meaning speaks of the outer world, the macrocosmos. The inner meaning speaks of the inner world, the human being. So, when the outer meaning refers to God as the highest power in the universe, the inner interpretation is the highest power within the human being. When the outer meaning speaks of a devil as an evil force bent on deviating humankind, the inner meaning is referring to our chief weaknesses. When the outer meaning is speaking of government, the inner meaning is referring to self-government. And so, when you transition from the outer meaning to the inner meaning of religion, you are transitioning from religion to psychology.
Man's possibilities are very great. You cannot conceive even a shadow of what man is capable of attaining. But in the consciousness of a sleeping man, his illusions, his dreams are mixed with reality. And this is the reason why he can never make use of all the powers he possesses.
Gurdjieff begins by presenting his teaching to people drawn to mysticism, spirituality, or psychology. This is first done through casual discussions in cafes, and later in more formal lectures. Throughout these lectures, however, he always stresses that real change will require more organised work. Lectures are at best preparatory. From the very beginning, when he meets his first Russian students in 1912, Gurdjieff speaks of formalising his work, of raising funds to buy equipment, and of eventually hiring a permanent place. But the political environment of Russia prevents this.
Russia at that time was peaceful, rich, and quiet. The unexpected and catastrophic events of the World War destroyed it at the very height of its earlier activities.
Russia is about to experience atrocities on an unprecedented scale. World War I, followed by revolution, followed by civil war. War is unarguably the extreme manifestation of human irrationality, of what Gurdjieff called sleep and mass hypnosis. A handful of politicians can't reach an agreement around a table, and now thousands and thousands of soldiers will kill each other in battle.
From the very outset of his teaching, Gurdjieff will have to adapt to incredibly exacting circumstances, sometimes even life-threatening. On the other hand, this extreme display of human conflict forms a perfect canvas for his presentation. Why can't wars be stopped? Why can't people see the obvious? Why does humankind have to keep repeating its mistakes?
The general psyche of man is split into three completely independent entities, which bear no relation to each other and which are separate both in their functions and in their manifestations.
Gurdjieff calls these entities brains, or centres, because they govern all our actions. One is the mind, responsible for association, comparison, abstraction, categorization and conceptualization. Another is the heart, responsible for fear, anxiety, care, sensitivity, compassion, and processing various other emotional impressions. And the third is the body, responsible for physical impulses, sense perception, hunger, pain, pleasure, movement, and spatial orientation.
We made many experiments and observations in order to satisfy ourselves that the notion of three centers was valid.
Gurdjieff gave the ideas little by little, as though defending or protecting them from us. When touching on new themes for the first time, he gave only general principles, often holding back the most essential. On the question of centers, for instance, he first spoke of three centers: the intellectual, the emotional, and the moving, and tried to make us distinguish these functions, find examples, and so on. Afterward, the instinctive center was added, as an independent and self-supporting machine. Afterward, the sex center.
In the terminology of certain Eastern teachings, the body of a man, with all its motor reflex manifestations, corresponds to the carriage. All the manifestations of feeling of a man correspond to the horse harnessed to the carriage and drawing it. The coachman sitting on the box and directing the horse corresponds to thought. And finally, the passenger sitting in the carriage and giving orders to the coachman is what is called I.
The terminology is Hindu. The analogy is featured in the Vedas, the ancient Hindu texts, and is later elaborated upon in the Upanishads. This shows that Gurdjieff knew the inner meaning of Hinduism, which he and his seekers of truth could have learned in Indian schools or Tibetan monasteries. Now, one might think that the outer circle and inner circle possess different knowledge, but in fact, both draw from the same ancient text. They interpret them differently.
The symbolism of horse, carriage, and driver is hidden by being placed in an historical context. Before the Kurukshetra war in the Mahabharata, Arjuna is seated on a carriage harnessed to horses, engaging in dialogue with his driver Krishna. And in Buddhism, when Prince Siddhartha ventures outside his palace, he mounts a carriage drawn by 4 horses, led by his driver Chandaka. Thus, placed as secondary details of important historical events, the esoteric significance of horse, carriage, and driver are easily overlooked.
So if the psyche of the human being is made of 3 separate brains, that explains why we perpetually contradict ourselves. It explains why it's so difficult for us to understand ourselves, each brain speaking, as it were, a different language. And on a larger scale, it explains why humankind, comprised of non-unified beings, has such a difficulty reaching understanding, is destined to live in a confusion of tongues, always ending up in conflict.
Thus, the psychology taught in the inner meaning of ancient teachings approaches human beings as incomplete. Nature brings us only to a certain point, beyond which we must work to fulfill our innate potential. As long as we remain undeveloped, there is a random relation between our three brains and their many impulses. There is no unified governing element, no master to command the driver, who can then discipline the horse and guide the carriage.
We're very easily influenced, deeply prone to suggestibility. Our thoughts, our emotions are not our own. They're programmed into us in our childhood, through education, through fashion. We lend them an air of individuality as if we intend to think and feel the way we do, but in truth we're puppets, and the strings that govern our actions don't lie in our own hands.
We say, I did this. I think this. I want to do this. But this is a mistake. There is no such I. There are hundreds, thousands of little I's in every one of us. Each minute, each moment, man is saying or thinking I, and each time his I is different. Just now it was a thought. Now it is a desire. Now a sensation. Now another thought, and so on, endlessly. Man is a plurality. Man's name is Legion.
In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus confronts a man possessed by demons and asks his name. The man responds, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So the inner meaning of being possessed by demons is being enslaved to our many internal impulses. This shows Gurdjieff was familiar with the inner meaning of Christianity, which he could have learned in Cappadocia or Mount Athos.
The outer meaning considers being possessed by demons to be a rare exception, an unfortunate freak of nature that must quickly be healed. The inner meaning, however, affirms all human beings to be possessed by demons. All suffer from lack of inner unity, all lack a governing element, all have no permanent I. Now a strong physical impulse directs us, hunger, fatigue, sexual desire. And then an emotional impulse replaces it, guilt, self-pity, or the need to be appreciated. And then a mental impulse replaces that, curiosity, disagreement, fantastic daydreaming, without end.
The majority of people will never admit to themselves that this is how their inner world functions. We call our daydreaming thinking. We call our negative emotions sincerity. We pretend to have intention behind our actions. We pretend to be conscious and unified.
This compounds our difficulty, for not only do we lack unity, we are also ignorant of our lack of unity. Not only are we slaves to our inner impulses, we are also enslaved unawares. As long as we pretend to possess self-government, we will never make the efforts required to achieve it.
Gurdjieff often returned to this example of prison and escape from prison in his talks. Sometimes he began with it, and then his favorite statement was that if a man in prison was at any time to have a chance of escape, then he must first of all realize that he is in prison.
Prince Siddhartha was born and raised imprisoned in a palace without knowing it. His father placed him there from birth to isolate him from the sufferings in life that might cause him to ponder its meaning.
Episodes from the life of the Buddha lined the walls of early Buddhist temples. some of which may well have been standing when the seekers of truth visited places like Afghanistan in the end of the 19th century. Scenes of his mother's auspicious conception, the birth, the first 7 steps, the gradual realization of being imprisoned, all the way to enlightenment under the Bodhi tree.
The movement through such a temple becomes a reenactment of the life of Prince Siddhartha. Now, on the level of the outer meaning, one would be learning about the life of the founder of one's religion, but on the level of the inner meaning, one would be learning the steps that lead from imprisonment to liberation.
By 1916, a small core of serious students have gathered around Gurdjieff in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Gurdjieff takes 8 of them to a country house in Finland for more concentrated work.
A man is unable to keep watch on the whole of himself. Only school can do this. School methods, school discipline. A man is much too lazy. He will do a great deal without the proper intensity, or he will do nothing at all while thinking that he is doing something.
Another experiment in more organized group work occurs in 1917, when Gurdjieff collects 13 of his first Russian students for 6 weeks at Issyk-Toky, at the base of the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. Ouspensky gives a personal report of this in his book In Search of the Miraculous, singling it out as a pivotal moment in his understanding and development.
In one teaching, man is compared to a house in which there is a multitude of servants, but no master and no steward. The servants have all forgotten their duties. No one wants to do what he ought. Everyone tries to be master, if only for a moment. And in this kind of disorder, the house is threatened with grave danger.
One of the best examples of this analogy, very well hidden under the coat of an outer meaning, comes from the Old Testament, from the progression of Israel from 12 warring tribes to a united kingdom. But rather than a disordered house, we speak here of a disordered country. The 12 tribes share in common only their ancestry and belief, but in all other respects are different, just like we have a single body and name, but in all other respects are full of contradictions.
In those days there was no king in Israel, says the book of Judges of Israel at that point in time. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes.
The only chance for salvation is for a group of more sensible servants to meet together and elect a temporary steward, that is, a deputy steward.
And indeed, the elders of each tribe convene to elect a king. They anoint Saul their first king. Saul represents observing eye. He is followed by King David, who represents deputy steward.
Deputy steward can then put the other servants in their places and make each do his own work. The cook in the kitchen, the coachman in the stables, the gardener in the garden, and so on. In this way, the house can be got ready for the arrival of the real steward, who will, in his turn, prepare it for the arrival of the master.
In the Bible, master or Lord are interchangeable with God. So when King Solomon erects a temple in Jerusalem and achieves a permanent connection with God, this symbolizes establishing a permanent connection with a master, the fulfillment of the highest potential in the microcosmos human being.
A man who has reached the full development possible possesses will, consciousness, permanent and unchangeable I, individuality, and many other properties which in our blindness and ignorance we ascribe to ourselves.
Ultimately, Gurdjieff came to teach how to find the God within, not in a religious, sentimental way, but through measurable scientific efforts, specifically the effort of self-remembering.
The word zikr literally means remembering, which in Gurdjieff's presentation is the means to remembering oneself. The special characteristic of the Sufi zikr is the invocation of the name of God. It is a directing of the intention and the will toward the deity within.
When you become aware not only of what you are doing, but also of yourself doing it, you see both I and the here of I am here. This is self-remembering. Try to remember yourselves when you observe yourselves, and later on, tell me the results. Only those results will have any value that are accompanied by self-remembering.
The very first attempts at self-remembering failed to give any results, except to show me that in actual fact, we never remember ourselves.
We soon realized that we were quite unable to remember ourselves voluntarily for more than a minute or two at a time. I struggled desperately hard. This was my first experience of work on myself, and it opened a new world for me. I began to see for the first time what Gurdjieff had meant when he said that it was not enough to know, but that one also had to be.
Self-remembering is so simple, yet at the same time so difficult. Why? Because the whole of life, together with things in ourselves, is in a conspiracy to make us forget, to keep us in a state of sleep.
This is the liberation that Gurdjieff speaks of. It is the aim of all schools, all religions. In the experience, I open to the divine, the infinite beyond space and time, the higher force that religions call God.
Gurdjieff presented so many ideas, it would be easy to get lost in them all if there weren't this one practical idea that anchored them together. Self-remembering is the way to align the horse with the carriage and the driver. Self-remembering is the way to escape from the prison of our psychology. Self-remembering is the way to govern our warring tribes in our cosmos. So Gurdjieff didn't come bringing a new theory to replace old theories of awakening. He came to teach his students how to be able to be.